All right, so today we're talking about web design, responsive web design. If you haven't heard this phrase before, responsive web design is basically an approach to building websites in which the website responds to certain aspects of a user's device. And that way it allows it allows the developer to show a more appropriate version of the site to the user based on their device. So most commonly, a responsive website needs to adapt to the width of the user's device. And that's typically what we are going to account for. Some other websites, depending on what you're trying to build, would take into consideration maybe the device's operating system or the device's capabilities, or what like if it has a touch screen versus a mouse and keyboard, or even sometimes browsers that don't support JavaScript, you can account for that in your code when you're making your website. So most of the approaches for responsive web design fall into two categories. One is going to be called, so the two categories are going to be depending on whether you're primarily targeting larger full-featured devices or smaller, more limited devices first. So one of the first categories that we're going to talk about is going to be called progressive enhancement. So progressive enhancement is a style of responsive web design in which you are designing primarily for the smallest and most limited devices. So basically a device that has a touch screen without a mouse and keyboard, and then gradually add non-essential features for larger screen. So for progressive enhancement, you're building for smaller, less capable devices, and what is it called? And gradually adding features. So let's see an example of progressive enhancement. One website that does this is LinkedIn. I'm not logged in here. Hold on. Let me open the other browser. Please. There we go. Okay. So if I go to LinkedIn, and I can look at this website and I see that there's a lot of different components, and my screen is relatively big. So this is a regular like laptop size device. So let's see what happens when I make the screen width smaller. So keep making it smaller, nothing seems to change. The free space here, it's just empty space, and it seems like all the components are centered. So I keep making it smaller, nothing's really happening until I hit this point. So I hit this point, there's a certain width where the layout squishes a little bit. So this is something that is called a breakpoint. So a breakpoint is a little separate. So a breakpoint is basically a width at which at which the website style changes to accommodate. Okay. So here I don't really see the widths like I would with a Chrome browser, but so we know that when it gets to here, that's a breakpoint, and then things squish a little bit. Let's go even further. So let's keep going and going and going. Okay, so this is another breakpoint. We see that we got to a point where the screen is a little too small to effectively have the entire search bar here. And so when we make it smaller, they changed it from a bar to an icon. So if we click, we can see that this shows up, but it's a little less intuitive because you don't really know what's going to happen when you click on this. Is it going to take you to a new page? Is it going to do a pop-up? It's a little less clear. So if we keep going further and further, you see this is essentially like a non-essential piece for LinkedIn to work. So if it was on a smaller device, they decided that this section showing news and the ads are not as essential as the main content of the website and then your information on the left. So you keep making it smaller, see that goes away. And then at this breakpoint, you see they removed the titles for all the icons. So when you're making like a nav bar or any icons in general, there's 3 ways to really show your icon. So you can have only text, which is the clearest, so everyone knows what it is. But it's it'll take the longest to actually like look for it. So all of these were only text. You would have to read through everything to understand it. If everything's just an icon, it's kind of faster to find things, but you would have to know what the icons do to actually know what that button will do. So it's a little less clear. And then the happy medium is having both an icon and the text, but that will come at the cost of space. So when you want it to be smaller, they decided to remove the text and just keep icons. Then we keep going smaller and we see that they got rid of this left pane and made it part of the top up here. So if you want to go into more information, you go here, but the main feed is basically, what is it called? It is basically LinkedIn's main content. This is the content that they want to show on their website. So they make sure that that is always present, no matter how small the screen gets. So here we see there was another breakpoint that shifts everything small to make it smaller. So here makes it a little smaller. And then if we keep going, yeah, that's pretty much it. So there was a point where the last few icons didn't fit. So they put it in like a little menu, and then you can access the rest of the elements here. So this is an example of progressive enhancement. So this is basically the main content, but then as the screen size gets bigger, then we can add some more less essential features pretty much to the website. Any questions about this?
Wait, I have one question.
Mm-hmm.
So the stuff that disappear, like on the sides, like are they gone, or are they somewhere in the page still, or how's
So
that?
I don't think it is anywhere in the page because they just decided that it's not as important. So then you would probably have to go somewhere else and find where the news articles are. Which, yeah, I don't see them immediately. But yeah, so they're completely unavailable, basically. So if you're viewing LinkedIn on a website, on your phone, you're most likely just going to see your feed, and then you would have to go to other places to find other information, because that's what they decided was the most essential piece of the website, and that you don't really need LinkedIn news unless you have enough space to see it.
So if you load this, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was gonna ask, so if you load this on your phone, do the sidebars still load technically?
These ones, no, the elements would not be there.
Well, like
Actually,
I'm
let's see.
not like that you can't see it, but do they like slow down the process because you're still technically loading them, but you're not showing them off to the user?
Yeah, that was gonna be my question. Are they still loading in the background, even though they're not displayed?
I'm not sure, actually. It depends on how the website is made. So if the element is not there, then it's not fetching data maybe, or it depends on how the website is built. So if you're fetching the data regardless for the entire site, whether this is there or not, then it would be still like grabbing that information even though the thing isn't there. So I'm not sure how LinkedIn does this. But yeah, so I can see this div here. I make it smaller. The newsfeed module seems to still.
Yeah, it makes sense because you can just rotate your phone and it'll probably show you everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think now it's hidden. Let me see. They have a display. I'm not sure. Yeah, because it still shows up in the actual HTML. But it's possible that they put like a hidden display, or the property display hidden, sorry, or display none, to just not have it show up.
What's the div above that?
This one?
That might be where they're hiding it. Or section.
Is it behind the feed?
I think you just go up
think it
the
might-
ladder, and then I think you'll find what you're saying about the display being none.
Yeah.
Because you gotta go the whole column, not just that section.
Yeah.
There it is, that one.
This right here. Okay.
Mhm.
The
That's gonna be
side.
the one that, yeah.
This is the main one. So display block, and then if we
Mhm.
make it smaller, it still seems like display block is there.
Yeah, but scroll down that. It might be something where like they said, no, that's interesting.
Yeah, I'm not actually sure how they do it code wise. Because it might be just like hidden behind it, because it does seem like there's the dotted line, but it's not an actual component. Because this here is that it might be all the way at the end, but there is, oh, they put it at the end. Okay, now we know. So they actually didn't completely remove it, but they put it at the bottom of the page here. So they pretty much just moved it around. Or maybe they have like some sort of flex that like when it gets smaller, it just reorganizes the elements.
It's on grid. See it now. The side's on a grid.
Yeah. Yeah, any other questions? Oh, I see here. Yeah, there's still a side, but okay. But yeah, this is one way of doing your website. Basically, whenever the width would change, things either appear or move around based on that. And we'll see how we can find the width or trigger that in a bit. The second category. Oops. Second category is called graceful degradation. Degradation. Okay. So graceful degradation is a style which you design primarily for the largest, most capable devices like laptops with a mouse and keyboard, and then gracefully remove features from devices that can't handle it. So ideally, removed features would be replaced with an alternative, or at least the user is told that like you can't view this properly because you are missing this. So if a website was using like if a website needed a mouse and it could detect that you didn't have a mouse, then you would want to say something like, you don't have a mouse, it's not working. But a more common example, which is a little simple, but it's using the no script tag. So basically, if your website needs JavaScript to work, you can put a no script tag. So when a browser does not have JavaScript enabled, then you'll see either a message saying that your website you need JavaScript to run this web page, or you would see you would put your like a static version pretty much, or plain text version of your website in the no script tag to show to a person who doesn't have JavaScript. So let me make an example here. I'm just going to make an HTML page. Let's see if we can get it to autocomplete HTML. There we go. Cool. So we have a head, and then we have a body. And then in this body, I'm going to just put header. Hello there. And then if I want to accommodate for the people who don't have JavaScript, and let's say my website does need JavaScript, I can use a no script tag. So, and in here I can put whatever I want to display if the browser has no JavaScript enabled. So for now, I'm just going to say you need JavaScript to run this website. Okay, I'm going to run this. I can run it either with my live server. I'm not sure if you guys have seen this, but Python has a module, so -m means module, has a module called HTTP that will allow you to run an HTTP server. So I'm inside my folder here. I can just run Python -m http.server, and it will run Python 3. And it'll run something on localhost at port 8000. And if you wanted to specify a port, you can put a port number afterwards. So now if I go and I look at localhost, I see hello there. Cool. So this no script, you see it's grayed out here. It's not actually rendering to the screen. There's no element here that is, what is it called? That is showing up because I have JavaScript enabled on my browser. So you can actually simulate having no JavaScript by going to the settings. If you're on Chrome, it might look a little different, but basically, I'll show you on Chrome as well. But you scroll down, let's see, disable JavaScript. So if I do that, we saw that the you need JavaScript to run this website popped up because I don't have JavaScript on my website anymore. And yeah, this is a way to basically tell your users that they need to enable it. Any questions on this? And let me show you guys if we're using Chrome. If I go to localhost, and in here, if I go to the developer portal, I can see. So it's a little annoying that there's multiple years, like the settings, but you're going to take the top settings and then scroll down to debugger down here, disable JavaScript, and then refresh. You'll see it here. Dave, you're saying there's a no script plugins for more for most browsers that will disable JavaScript by default. Cool, yeah. Yeah, that is very useful if you're if you're visiting like websites that are questionable, because JavaScript can just start running on in your browser, and it might do things that you don't want. Awesome. Okay. I'll keep using the Chrome developer tools. Okay, so let's talk about the screen size difference. So that's mainly what we're going to care about when we're building these websites, when we want to make sure that they are that they work on different screen sizes. So let's do that. I am going to comment this one out. Let's see. This. String is going to be, and if it will fit on the page. Okay, so let's say we have a long phrase here. It doesn't really fit on the page comfortably. It does if we have a bigger size, but as we get smaller, it gets smaller. So one way to check if your website, like how it looks on different sizes, there's a button up here that looks like two little devices. So it says toggle device toolbar. I'm going to click on it, and you can choose what type of device you want. So responsive means you can just move it around. I can choose like an actual phone size to emulate it. And you see here that the font became very, very small. So even if I'm looking at 100%, this is supposed to be an H1. So let's see if we add a paragraph of some sorts. It should, oops. Oh, I have caps lock on. Okay. So let's say, I think if you, yeah, this is a shortcut in VS Code. If you start writing lorem, it'll give you like a long, like the famous Latin phrase that like it just fills it in. So if I refresh here, I see that this is a little smaller. It became bigger for some reason, which was not what I was expecting. Okay, so let's go to this. We see it over here. And then if we go to a different phone, it's not as small. It shows up smaller in some other instances. Okay. But basically, the whole point of this is phones will automatically make things smaller. When they see a website, they'll assume that it's way too big, and it will automatically scale down. So the way to get around this is to add a meta tag that will not let the phone automatically shrink our website. So we want to be a little more in control in that aspect. Let me see if I run it here. So here, if I go to the devices, yeah, it is a little smaller, but not much. Okay, this is what I was trying to say. So basically, you look at the site. This is not very readable. This is a this is at 100%, I think. I don't know how to see that, but basically, if I'm looking at this on my phone, I would have to bring it very, very close, and I wouldn't be able to see the content. So the way to get around this is to add a meta tag in your header. So this meta tag is going to contain, so the name is viewport. So we want to change the viewport of our application. And then we want to say, so content equals, we want to say that I want the width of this website to be equal to the device width. Device width. I think it's a dash. Yeah. So device width, and then I also want initial scale to be equal to 1. So this basically means, so initial scale equals to 1 is make my scale to be 100% of the website. So I don't want you to make it smaller. And the width of my screen, I want it to be the width of the device. So that way, when you're using the width within your code, it'll be reflective. So let's see now if we refresh here. Now we see this became bigger. So it's not automatically squishing everything down, but we can, and now we can actually read this. I think Chrome might have automatically done this. Like it might have automatically added the tag. But yeah, that's why it was kind of already a little big when we saw it. But yeah, so this is a very common way to make this happen. In fact, we saw this shortcut the other day. If you do exclamation point and you automate the creation of an HTML doc, that meta tag is actually included. So automatically people know that you don't want the phones to auto scale your website down because it's going to ruin the experience. There's a few other things that you can do with this. Let me get the link. One sec, sorry guys. So this is linked to in the lecture, but basically it just shows you what types of things you can set in this meta tag. So user scalable allows device to zoom in or not on your website. You typically don't want to really mess with this. You should allow people to zoom into your website if you're on a phone, because some people either can't see it clearly or might have some issue with their devices. So allowing them to make the website bigger and smaller is important. Yeah, there's like minimum scale, maximum scale, initial scale, which we set to 1 because we wanted everything to be at 100% of the website. Yeah, questions about this? Okay, so yeah, the meta tag basically just modifies the behavior a little bit and allows us to develop normally and not have to account for shrinkage, because it shouldn't be shrinking our page. Okay, I'm gonna remove this. All right, so how do we actually play around with, how do we use units that can be responsive? How do we actually know where like the breaking points are and stuff like that? So there are a few responsive units that we can use in our CSS. First one we are going to talk about is the %. So one way to make a design that works for a different screen size is to avoid fixed units. So we have fixed units like what is it called? Pixel. So pixel is just going to count actual pixels on the screen. So this is not going to be great for building a responsive website. So there's a few other properties that we can use. So one of the most common and basic one is the %. And even though it's the simplest one, it's not the best for all situations. So basically 1% in CSS will mean 1% of the parent element. So that means whenever you set a percentage, you have to care about what the parent size is and where it is. And if you move certain elements around, you might have to, things might break because of how the percentages are happening. So it's a little tricky to work with because yeah, when you're restructuring your HTML, you might resize the elements, even though the screen size is the same. So for some CSS properties, there's a CSS property that is called transform. If you ever come across it. So inside transform, using a % means a % of the actual element. And not its size. You most likely will not come across transform because it's used with something that used to be used a long time ago and is older, so you probably won't come across it. But if you do, % within the transform context means something different than % in general. So yeah, typically in most CSS contexts, 1% of a width or a length or something like that is going to be 1% of the parent element and not the page as a whole, or not the width or height as a whole. Okay.
Just really quick, are we going to be going over stuff like transform and other CSS manipulation attributes later on in the course? I'm kind of curiosities about.
No, so let me see, CSS transform. This is an older version. We don't really, it uses, let's see. Oh, I guess there's translate. Okay.
If not, it's fine. I was just curious.
Yeah, I don't think we will for transform specifically. We will be talking about like Flexbox and some other units or some units of measurement today, but no, I don't believe we will touch on it. Okay, yeah, so transform, you can like transform the object that you're in, or the element that you are referring to. Okay, so we talked about %. Let's see an example of this. So let's say we have, remove this. Let's see, what should I do here? I'm gonna say this is actually, it doesn't matter. Yeah, we can play around with it later. But basically we can get a percentage of something based on the parent. So let's talk about some more responsive units. Another responsive unit or some of them that we will hear about are VH, VW, Vmin, and Vmax. Okay. So VH is always going to be, so the V is for viewport, or the actual like screen of the device that you're working with. So this one is going to be 1%. So if we're talking in percentages, so yeah, 1 VH is going to equal 1% of the height of the browser. Similarly, 1 VW is going to be 1% of the width. And this is regardless of the Windows dimension. It will always be in sync of that. So let's see an example of this. Let's say we have, I'm going to call this a pop-up. I'm gonna add a CSS file. So do we do main for CSS? I forget. Doesn't matter.
Style,
Sorry?
style, or styles.
Styles.css. Okay. Remind me, is this source src? Yes, no. I'm gonna assume it is. So styles.css. And then I forgot the name. It was
Rel equals style sheet.
rel. Okay. Yeah, thank you.
That was href also.
Yeah, it's href, not source.
Thank you. Style sheet and then href. Okay. Then we're closing this out. So now if we have this div, I look at this, I'm going to say, going to change the background color for now. Let's do this one. And let's see what it looks like. Okay, so it did this entire div. Let's say I want the height of this to be, what is it called? The same height. So height equals to VH. So how many VHs do we want? Let's say
11.
11 VH. Okay, so this is going to be 11% of the height of the screen. So there we go. That's supposedly 11%. And then if I make it smaller, if I make the screen smaller, the height is also adapting. I can do the same for the width. So let's say I want the width to be 50% of the device's width. Forgot my semicolon. And then if I go here, so this is about half the page. If I keep making it smaller, it keeps making that smaller, and it should be half of the page. Okay, so that's pretty useful if you want this. So let's say I want to create a circle. So let's say this pop-up here is going to be a circle. So I need to edit the border radius. And I can just put as many pixels as I want because it'll just cap it. If I refresh, okay, so it rounded it, but the width is not correct because the width has to be equal to the height. So let's say my height is equal to 70 VH and then 70 VW. So height and width, I refresh, okay, it's about this size, but that means I would have to have the height and the width equal to the same thing, right? So a way around this is to say that I want the, what is it called? So this is where V max and V min come in. So one V max is equal to one of the height or the width, whichever is larger. And then V min is going to be the same thing, but for whatever's smaller. So if I say this is 70 V min, that means I'm going to take 70% of the minimum, whichever is smaller. So either the height or the width, whichever is smaller, and then I can take the same for the width of the circle. So if I refresh here, it's going to take into account this. So right now the height is smaller. So as big as I make the width, it doesn't really change. If I make the height smaller, if I make the height smaller, then it's going to get smaller. And then if I make it bigger, so yeah, there's a point where it stops. Here it's going a little under the page because I have extra stuff up here. But yeah. So this is V min, it's going to take the minimum of either the height or the width. Let's see what happens if I make it V max. What do you guys think would happen? So if I'm making the size of the circle be 70% of the largest element.
Depends on your viewport size. If your width is longer, then it would take the width. If your height is longer, it would take the height.
Yeah, and it seems like it keeps going off the screen. So if we wanted to keep this on the screen at all times, then we would have to go with the minimum so it fits perfectly within it. Here we keep, so if we make this bigger, this is going to become bigger, but it's going to get cut off versus before V min, we refresh, it fits perfectly within here. And we can make it bigger, we can make it smaller. Yeah, we do notice that there is a point where if we make it like small enough, it's not going to fit because of the extra content that's on the page. But generally, if you want to keep it on the page, you can do that. But yeah, so that's basically what Vmin and Vmax do. So you can take the minimum or the maximum of either the width or the height, whichever one you want. Any questions?
I have a question on this one. So, how is it that the circle just keeps increasing with the size of like the window and stuff? And when does it like elongate with the window size? Like, does that make sense?
So so here it's not going to elongate because we made the height and the width be the same value. It is changing size because we are changing what the VH and VW equal to. So right now, here, let me open the developer portal, I think. Wait, is this Chrome? It is Chrome. Okay. I just wanted to see the height and the width of the page. Okay, here we go. So there we go. So so this is VH, sorry, this is VH, V height, and this is VW, V width. So the size of the browser is going to be tracked by those variables, so VH and VW. If I make this bigger, my width is getting bigger. If I make this bigger, my height is getting bigger or smaller. So what the min and max do is it takes so the minimum will take the smaller one. So it'll take either the height or the width, whichever is smaller. So right now, my width is smaller than my height. So the value for the height and width of my circle is going to be 70% of whatever is smaller. So since my width is smaller, this circle is going to be within the like 70% of the width. So even if I make my height bigger or smaller, it doesn't actually change anything until my height becomes smaller than my width, and then my circle changes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I see it now.
Yeah. So yeah, those are basically, because think of this, the V, or like VH, VW, Vmin, Vmax, think of those as variables. And this is the number in front of it is how much percent of that variable you want. So let's say my width, how much was it? Let's say my width is 906 pixels, or let's say it's just exactly 900 pixels. So you saw here that the height is 753. If I make it smaller, it's smaller. So let's say this is 700. I can't get it there. Okay, so that's 700 pixels. It will take 70% of the 700 pixels, and this will take 70% of the 700 pixels because that is the minimum in that in my browser, in my, like I basically made it like a rectangle. Yeah, any other questions about this?
Sorry, that last part, you said 70% of, oh, okay, that makes sense. So what would 70 max take up then?
So it'll take the max of sorry, it'll take 70% of the larger one. So so the min and the max refer to which one of height and width is larger or smaller. So min will take the smaller one, and then max will take the larger one. So if I make this max and I refresh, it's going to take 70% of the larger one. So if I move, so the height is still 700. I'm moving this is larger. So now my circle is getting bigger because I am moving the larger one. Versus if I had it back to min, it's not gonna, oops, let me refresh. It's not gonna move when I make the larger one larger. It's only gonna move when I make the smaller one bigger or smaller.
So I guess height and width should be relatively like, you know, V max or V min, they should be similar so that there's no, I guess you could say like an issue.
Not necessarily. So it just depends on what you're trying to do. So we cared about the max and the min here because we're doing a circle, and the circle has to be like squished on equal size. Like it has to be, the height of it has to be the same as the width, because it's a circle, and it has to stay, like the radius has to stay the same as along all sides. But the V height, so VH, VW, these are the ones that you're gonna typically use. Vmin and Vmax you're using when you only care about whichever is smaller or whichever is larger of the height and the width. So yeah, let's say pH is device's height. VW width. Vmin is height or width whichever is smaller, and then Vmax is same, oops, whichever is larger. Okay, does that make sense? So
Yeah, it
basi-
makes it clear.
yeah, awesome. Yeah, basically you have the height and the width. Vmin is referring to either the height or the width, whichever one is smaller. Vmax is referring to either the height or the width, whichever is larger. So these are basically variables that you can use within your CSS to get percentages off of that. Other questions? Okay. Another application of using Vmin and Vmax could be useful when you're designing layout that would adapt to a device's orientation. So you can kind of look at whatever is larger and put the yeah, you can reorient your design based on the screen size with Vmin and Vmax. Okay, some other units that are helpful are Ms and Rems. So Ms and Rems are two responsive units that are used for sizing fonts in particular. So an M is going to let you size an element relative to the element's parent font size. So here lets you size an element based on the parent font size. And then yeah, let's see an example of that one first before we go into Rems. So let's say I have, let's just do a div with, oops. And inside this div, I'm going to just put a paragraph that says, wow. Okay. So let's say on this div, I have a class that I'm going to define, and I'm going to use M size. I'm going to call this, oops, M size, and I'm going to create that class in here. Put a dash in here. Okay, so in this M size, I'm going to say my font size is going to equal, let's say 2M. Okay. And before we check on this, let's set our entire HTML documents font size to 16, which I believe that is the default, but can't spell font. Okay, font size, and we'll make this to be 16. And the element that has the M size class on it is going to be 2M. So if we do this, we should be able to see it. Okay, so we look here, it says wow. Let's inspect it and look to see what size it is. What's this? It's a little larger. Okay, so here, the HTML document font size is 16, makes sense. If I inspect this element specifically, I can see that it equaled 2M, which if I go to computed, it'll tell me the actual size. So the actual size of it was 32. So 2M means like 2 times the size of the parent. And the parent was my HTML document. So let's say we grab this, and I'm going to nest all of these. So I'm going to put each one within the other, within the other, within the other. So what do you guys expect to happen here?
Each paragraph is going to be twice as large as the last one, I think.
Yeah, so let's see what that does. Exactly. So if we looked at the inspector. So I see here this. So the font size for this one is still 32. The font size for this one is 64. Font size for the next one is 128, and so on. And then this one is, oh, I can actually see it from here, 256.
Wait, does that double everything? Not just the font size?
It'll double just the font size of this. So if I did, it'll double the font size of everything that's within this div. So if I even did, I don't know, an H1. Actually, yeah, this is going to be interesting to see what it does to the H1. I'm going to add this to everyone to see what happens. Okay. Yeah, so this was the size of the H1 originally. So that was 32 pixels. If we look at this H1, it's now 64. If we look at this H1, it is now 128 versus this one is 64. So how is this? Let's look at how this is actually computed, or how this looks. So it looks like M size was crossed out, and then the H1 took over. I think all H1s are 2M. Let me see. Yeah, so H1s in general are 2M, so it's gonna double the size of anything. So because of this, so in this one, when this one is 32, this is 2M, this is effectively 4M. This because this is an H1, so it took this the font size for this div out here that contains the wow and the check this together the entire font size for this element is 2M, but H1 added another 2, so it multiplied it by 2 again, which is why we have 64 instead of just the 32. And this one doesn't even fit on the screen. But yeah, so there is a bit of a downsize with this because of the nesting. So if you are nesting things, it is taking it off of the its parent. So another thing that we can do is use rem size. So rem. So rem is similar to M, but it lets you size based on the entire font size of the HTML document. So based on the HTML doc font size. So basically, if we changed all of these from M size to rem size, because I just made this new one. Okay, so I do all of them rem size. If I refresh, they all are now uniform. So they're all doing the same thing, even though they're nested, they are taking the M value the rem value from the larger HTML document and not just the parent directly. So yeah, this makes it easier to have like user adjustable fonts or have all your fonts change size at once, because you can only all you would need to do is change the HTML document font size and everything will scale accordingly. So if I'm using all of these with the rem size and I increase my HTML document font, or maybe I decrease it, so let's make it 10. So everything should automatically scale. And now everything's smaller.
Is it just the HTML that it has to be, or is it like whatever that is in? Like if it's inside a div, then since you didn't have a specific HTML because you didn't initiate it, would it just be in relative to that div?
No, so for rem specifically, it's always going to take it based off of the HTML font size. You don't have to specify the font size. So if I remove that, the automatic HTML size it should be 32. So display with height, let me see. Font.
You mean 16, default is 16.
Font size, yes, yeah, 16. So, so even if you don't specify it, the automatic font size for HTML is going to be 16 pixels, and whenever you use rem, it's going to take it based off of the larger HTML document. So it doesn't care about divs or nesting or whatever. Rem is based on the document as a whole.
Thank you.
Other questions? No, pretty straightforward. Yeah. M's, rems. Okay. Yeah, this is very useful because if you have a bunch of elements that you're that are styled in certain ways and different fonts in different places, if you're using rems, like I mentioned earlier, all you have to do is change the HTML base of font size to, yeah, and then that changes it. Okay, let's start talking about Flexbox a little bit. I know you guys were introduced to it. So Flexbox. So why are we talking about Flexbox today? So Flexbox is useful for solving like one-dimensional layout problems. So when you have a bunch of items that you are trying to line up in a row or a column, it allows you to do like overflow patterns and stuff like that. This is a different use case from CSS Grid. So CSS Grid is going to allow you to do like two-dimensional problems. So if you need like rows and columns specifically, so when you're creating your layout, the grid ends up being better than just using flexboxes everywhere. So yeah, Flex is a relatively new display type that changes the document flow in a container. It gives you more options on how you want to center and align your elements and stuff like that. So if I want to learn how to use text as Flexbox, how to use Flexbox. And the CSS tricks article is great. You guys might have seen this previously. There's some background and basic terminology, but I'm just gonna kind of dive in a little bit. So typically with flex boxes, you have a container that contains your flex. So it could be just a regular div with a certain property. So you set the display flex, and it allows you to modify certain things about the way that the items are displayed inside of it. So there's different directions. You can go left to right, right to left. Also column wise, you can do, so there's row reverse, column, and column reverse. You could also do wrapping. So if you have too many elements that are on the screen, when you make your screen bigger or smaller, it'll automatically do wrapping for you. And it can do it either, you can either not wrap, you can wrap, or you can wrap reverse. And yeah, and you can justify the content, so you can have all your stuff at the end or the beginning or the center. So it's a pretty versatile, useful things. You can also align the items against the vertical axis. So you can stretch your items, you can have them be at the start or the end, or baseline, which is based off of like the bottom of the text that you have. So yeah, the Flexbox is pretty useful. So let's see an example of this. Let me go back here. Okay, I'm gonna comment all of this out. I think, oh, I missed this. Okay. So let's say I have a div that's going to be a box for me, and it's just gonna say element, and I'm going to give it a class name. Let's say this is a, what should we call it? A flex container. Oops, flex container. Create a flex container. Okay. So in this container, I'm going to set display to the flex. And this is actually not going to be my element. I'm going to put a bunch of elements inside of it. So this div, I'm going to call this, what should I call this? That's element. And I'm just going to call this element. And in here, I'm going to start with just doing a border. So let's say border, I don't know, 3 pixel. I forgot the rest of it. And then you need the color. Let's say black. Line width, line style, and color. So I'm going to say solid black. Okay. So if I go back, I refresh my page, I'll see that I have a little element here. Let me choose a little bit of a larger size. So I'm going to say my width is equal to, give me a size, or I'll just choose 20 pixels. And then same for the height. Can't forget my semicolon. Okay. 20 pixels is way too small. I don't know, I guess 40. Okay, that's doable. Make it a little bigger, just so the content, the name fits inside of it. Okay, that's a decent enough element. So this element is within the container, and let's say I have a bunch of these elements. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, that's good enough. I'll do 8. I made a bunch. Okay, so I have a bunch of elements that are in a row together. Let's see where my flex box is. So if I make my flex container, if I make the border, or actually I'll just make a background color. Let's choose this. Okay, so my container is spanning the entire width of the row, and all my elements are currently within my container. So if we look at the code, we have our container and then a bunch of elements. So if we inspect the container, we can add another property. I can actually go back here to remember what the property name is. So let's say I want to change the flex direction. Actually, the flex direction isn't that big of a deal. Let's do justify content. So if I want to move things around my website, so let's say here, justify content, and there's a bunch of them. So I can start, let's just look at them. So space evenly, having a space between them. Space between, it cares more about the space between the elements. Let's make this a little bigger. So we have, oh no, it went away. What was it?
Justify content.
Justify, thank you. I have short-term memory. Justify content. And so space between, it makes sure that the space between the elements are equal. Space around, it makes sure that the space on the outside is the same space as the inside. So like from here to here, it's going to be the same as from here to here. So it makes sure that there's enough space around the sides of the elements as well. Right goes all the way to the right. Revert, I'm assuming that, actually, I don't know what revert does exactly. Some of them don't do much unless you have like certain things that you're doing special. Flex start, flex end, these are the more common ones, and then center. But yeah, having to do this with CSS without Flexbox would be very, very difficult. So let's say I'm going to choose specify content space around. Where is it in here? Okay. So what happens if I make my screen smaller and bigger? So here it gets smaller. I didn't really specify what kind of behavior for it to take, but the Flexbox helps with modifying the screen size and having the elements contain the space between them. Let's say I want to allow the content to wrap. So if we go back here, we do flex wrap. So I can say flex wrap, and I can do, let's say we're going to wrap around. So that means that when my screen gets too small to hold my content, it's going to add things to the next row. So yeah, the Flexbox is important to hold on to like the shape of your elements that you want, no matter what screen size it is. So you just have to specify these rules. So yeah, we can wrap it. Yeah, there's more that you can do with it. You can also, where is it? You can have, like, this is a cool one, flex grow. So it defines the ability for a certain item to grow if necessary. So basically, if it gets too large and there's enough space or there's extra space, then the item that you set this flex grow on will grow based on that. So let's see. I'm going to call this growing element. Let's grow. I can just put a 2. So if I put this on one of my elements, let's say the second one here. Okay. No, what did I call it? Growing element. So here I don't have enough space, but you see the moment there was extra space, my second one started to grow. It keeps growing. I would have to read a little bit more about like, what is the limit? What do the numbers actually mean? So if one of the children has a value of 2, that child would take up twice as much space of the space either one of the others has. So yeah, basically it just takes up more space. Even though I have a 2 here, it seems to grow much larger. And it's possibly because of the like how I'm justifying the content. But yeah, that would require a little bit of playing around with. So if I do space or set of space around. Let's just do flex start. Yeah, it seems like it's still doing the thing like this. But yeah, you can set these element specific attributes as well. So on the left side here is properties for the parent container, so the actual container. These are properties that you can set on the flex items themselves. You can reorder them, you can make them grow if there's enough space, you can make them shrink. And there's many more. You can align them as well. Any questions on Flexbox or something that you would want to see?
So the problem that me and Jose ran into yesterday was if you have a bunch of these elements, but you only want, say, 3 or 4 of them in one row at any time. It seems like you're forced to either fix their widths and the container width to ensure that they wrap at a certain rate, or have multiple containers each as a row with only the number of elements inside that you want. It just seems like there wasn't an easy way to make it just say I want 3 elements on this row.
So when we when we come back from our break, we're actually going to talk about Bootstrap a little bit. We're going to talk about something called media queries first, but then basically what you would need for that situation is a grid system. So to allow you to specify like the size of the elements and where they would go.
Yeah, we ended up going with CSS grid instead.
Yeah, you did end up going with that, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah.
After we explored all our options with Flexbox.
Yeah, so if you have to have it, so this is what I was kind of saying with like a one-dimensional problem versus a two-dimensional. One-dimensional is if you kind of just care about having them in a row and kind of handling like the overflows and stuff like that. But if you want to make sure that you have a certain amount of elements on a certain number of row, you can, I think grids might be a better solution for that. Chase is saying here in the chat that you can solve the problem with flex grow, but it might need a little bit more okay. Any other questions?
Are we able to use this stuff to make websites like the scale of the universe, or is that do they use something else for that kind of stuff?
What do you mean? Like what?
There's a website called Scale of the Universe, and like you can like scroll in and out, and I'm pretty sure they don't. It's not just HTML and CSS, but like, is this possible to make with these tools?
I'm not sure. This is cool though. Let's see what they're using. It might be more like
Adobe Flash.
It looks like they're just resizing SVGs somehow in a very uniform way.
Yeah, this is a good question. I actually don't know. This is not animation. I'm not sure. Yeah, we'll maybe we can ask Ben later if he has any ideas. He might know. But yeah, great question. Okay. Oh, well, an SVG is a type of file where it's so instead of having if you look at what an SVG file looks like, it looks like numbers and code and stuff like that. So you can store vector graphics in there and not just images. And vector graphics are basically math that represents your image. So you're able to have an image without like the background and stuff like that.
It also lets you make them bigger and smaller without losing resolution.
Yeah, exactly. Because you have basically the formula of how it looks and yeah. All right, let's take a break. Let me pause this.